The myth here is that we must make an ally of Russia in order to combat the greater, longer-term systemic challenge posed by China. This is problematic in many senses, but it is a relatively recent myth because China's rise is also relatively recent itself. The reason this myth is so fallacious, why it's wrong in other words, is partly because it underestimates the challenge posed by Russia, because China itself, of course, is not crossing borders in anger in the same way that Russia is. Russia has, of course, caused 13,500 deaths in Ukraine, tens of thousands in Syria. It engages in radiological and biological poisonings abroad. We should not, of course, prematurely dismiss the prospects, or at least the possibility, of having a better relationship with China. And that possibility has all but disappeared as far as Russia is concerned. It wouldn't really work anyway. This presupposes that Russia wants to reconcile itself with the West, that it wants to become part of the West. But Russia is, in any case, more inclined to ally itself with China as a fellow autocracy, if you like, than it is inclined to use bodies such as the UN Security Council. The other reason that reconciling with Russia in order to deal with the China challenge is inadvisable is that it may have the effect of reinforcing China's pre-existing capabilities. And Russia itself, of course, has reservations about China itself anyway. It shares a long border with China, and there is a great population disparity between the two. So Russia has always been keenly aware that China is eating its lunch, if you like, especially, of course, in Central Asia. I believe that accommodating Russia would mean sacrificing far too much. Quite notably, the conditions that Russia would demand for reconciliation and cooperation would ultimately mean sacrificing the independence and sovereignty of the other post-Soviet states, notably Ukraine, but also Georgia, Moldova, and many others. So effectively what we would be doing in reconciling with Russia would be to further tatter the West's already battered democratic system. Ultimately, I feel that these countries should be addressed and tackled according to their individual merits and misdemeanors.
The myth that I chose holds that it's possible for Western policymakers to set Russia and China against each other in order to impede their capacity to work in tandem to undermine the interests and values of the United States and its allies. And it's premised on the corollary that Russia and China formed this single strategic entity that was somehow allowed to form by negligent Western policymakers. The thing about this myth is just that it overstates the role of the West in bringing Moscow and Beijing together. This divide and rule narrative similarly exaggerates the West's ability to pull the two apart. And in the process, it misunderstands both the natural symbiosis that underpins the Sino-Russian relationship, as well as the factors that constrain it. And just as importantly, these efforts to pry Russia apart from China, which we've known through a succession of US administrations, also plays right into the Russian and Chinese view of the US as a declining power that's seeking to reassert its dominance and with limited advantage. Just as the West did not join Russia and China together, it cannot pull them apart. And it gives rise to the false notion that the West has the leverage and the capacity to do so. Most aspects of cooperation are the natural outcomes of shared interests and geography. The two powers have complementary economies and interests in the spheres of technology, cyber cooperation, and defense. There's an ideological compatibility. We should adjust our notions of great power competition in order to pragmatically target the areas where joint actions by Moscow and Beijing could be countered successfully. And we also have to recognize that we lack the leverage to craft policies that could dramatically alter this relationship. So we really also should be seeking to try to counterbalance the Sino-Russian partnership by nurturing stronger and more effective alliances with multilateral and regional organizations, as well as key partners such as India, Vietnam, South Korea.